Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 4 of Python for Beginners. This is a playlist or a small series I'm putting together for anyone out there who wants to learn Python. This is not an advanced course, this is a beginner course. So if you're new to Python, this is probably a pretty good place to start. If this is the first video you've seen in my series, feel free to check out the playlist. I start from the very beginning, installing Python, getting PyCharm, the IDE installed. And then in the previous video, we looked at our different data types. And today, again, episode 4, we're going to look at our control structures. So this is kind of the way that you would control the flow of your program or your Python code. Because you can have all this cool stuff in there, but you need it to flow in specific ways. So today we're going to look at those different control structures, some basic ones anyway. We're going to look at if statements, else, elif, for, and then while. So for and while are loops, and the others are if, else, and elif conditions. All right, let's jump right in, guys. Okay, the first one we'll look at is an if statement. I will define a variable just so this is easier to look at. So we'll say the age equals 18, and then we'll start with our if statement here. When I first got into programming, I realized that a lot of this is just if this, then that. That's really at its like most basic level, or while this, then that, for this, then that. It's really basic, but then you can get very advanced. But at the super high level, you're basically saying if this, then that. That's a very good way to start thinking about programming. As a former network engineer, I still do some network engineering and network administration in my role. I learned when you would create like on a Cisco router or Cisco switch, you can do route policies, and that's basically what you're doing. You're saying if this, then that. It's a way to control things when conditions are met or conditions are not met. So it's very powerful. It sounds very simple, which it can be, but it's very powerful. All right, so back to the if statement. We're going to say if age is greater than or equal to 18, and then we'll put a colon there. So this is our basically our condition that we're looking to question. So if age is greater than or equal to 18, then we hit a colon, hit enter, and using an IDE, this is the beauty of using an IDE such as PyCharm. It's going to do the indent and everything for you, and it's also going to call out any errors in your syntax. So if I wouldn't have put that colon, it'd probably, say, hey, you forgot something there. Okay, so if that condition is met, we're going to print. Again, defining variables and using print statements is a very good way to test your logic and be able to see on the screen what's happening, specifically with the print statement, obviously. Okay, we're going to say you are an adult, which is kind of crazy. 18, you're an adult, right? Now that I have kids, I think that's way too young. But anyways, so if we run this, you are an adult. Cool. All right, so that is a very basic if statement, right? So now we can tack onto that and we can say if, and then we can do else, and that'll make more sense here in a second when we do it. Okay, so I'm going to say if. So this is basically saying else if. So the first statement says if age is 18, and then I want to do another if statement, right? So I'm going to say elif, which is like else if age is greater than or equal to 13, and it'll only hit this evaluation or question, whatever you want to call it, if the first one's not met. So let's go ahead and do elif age is greater than or equal to 13. Print you are a teenager. Can't wait for those years. They're coming. Okay, and then the last one will be else. So if neither one of those first conditions, the if or the elif, were met, then the last one, regardless, we don't even have to evaluate anything here. We're just going to say print you are a child. All right. So let's talk through this real quick before we run it. So currently the age is 18. So if the age is 18, if the age is greater than or equal to 18, we're going to meet this condition and we're going to print you are an adult. If this is not met, and we'll change this to 15 just for our first demonstration, If this is not met, it's going to go down to the next evaluator. So this is saying if age is greater than or equal to 13. If that is met, print you are a teenager. So if this was 18, it would meet this one, right? It would also meet this one because it's greater than or equal to 13, but it would never make it down to this statement or this evaluation because it's already met one here. Remember, this is only if. So if this is met, we're done. We're going to close out. If age is greater than or equal to 13, you're a teenager. Hopefully that makes sense, guys, because if you look at these for face value, like just this part and just this part, 18, when we had this at 18, would be true on both these. But again, if it hits this one, since it's first, it's never going to get to that one to evaluate. So I'm going to run it at 18 again just to demonstrate that. And you see we only get the first print statement, which is you are an adult. We change that to 15. It's obviously not going to meet this one because it's not greater than or equal to 18. So it's going to move down to the next evaluation. It's going to say if age is greater than or equal to 13, which this is, we should get you are a teenager. There you go. You are a teenager. Okay, now the last one is basically a catch-all. So anytime you see else, think of that as like a catch-all. So I could have 100 elifs here, right? If I wanted, that would be really sloppy code. But if you did, let's say you had like 5, and this number or this variable value didn't meet any of those conditions. It doesn't matter what it is. It's going to hit the else at the bottom, the old catch-all, and it's going to say you're a child in this case. So I'm going to do 12. Yeah, child seems younger than that. Let's do 5. And then this should print out you're a child. There you go. So we'll talk through that one more time. Since the age is 5, didn't meet the first evaluation, didn't meet so it moved on to the second, right? Because if it met the first one, you'd be done. It moved on to the elif, so it checked if the age was greater than or equal to 13. It did not meet that condition, so it didn't have to evaluate anything. Since it failed the first two, it moved on to the else, and then it said doesn't matter what it is, it's just going to say you are a child. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. It's a very simple example of using if statements, elif statements, and else statements. One more thing to note here before we move on, guys. When you're working with these elifs and else statements, those are never going to exist without the presence of that first if statement. So you can't have an elif if you don't have an if first, because there's nothing to say else if against, if that makes sense. So you first have to check if this, right? And you could end it there. Like you don't need this. I think we demoed that originally. But then if you wanted a further evaluation, you would say elif. So hopefully that makes sense. You're always going to have an if you have an elif or an else. All right, let's take a look at the next type of control structure. Okay, before we move on from the if statements, I did want to just kind of tack on one little more nugget here. I know we talked about ifs and elifs and else. You can also do multiple if statements, right? These don't really nest on top of each other, but instead of saying if age greater than or equal to 18, and then elif age greater than or equal to 13, which in this case would make more sense with the elif and the else, just know that you can do multiple if statements and it will evaluate all of these if statements. So it's not like an elif would be like if this wasn't met, then move on to this one. And then an else would say if these weren't met, move on to this one. Multiple ifs is just basically exactly what it sounds like, right? It's going to check this condition, check this condition, check this condition. So if we run this, it's not going to make a lot of sense in this case. It's going to, well, I put adult twice, but either way, it printed all 3 of these because the conditions were met for all 3 of those. So just know that you can do multiple if statements if your specific need doesn't call for an elif and an else, right? So hopefully that makes sense. If not, let me know, guys. And if you have an else, you wouldn't have a condition here. It's just an else. All right. Let me know, guys. Okay, let's move on to the world of for loops. So before we start writing any code here, I want to just briefly talk about what a for loop does and what it is. So at its most simple state, a for loop can be used to iterate through everything in this example, a list, but you can kind of think of it in terms of if you have a bunch of stuff and you want to do something for each one of those things, you can use a for loop. I know that's super general the way I just described it, but think about if you have a Word document, a notepad, maybe a spreadsheet, and you need to do something to every single row or every single line, or maybe you just need to examine every single row and every single line or line, right, in that spreadsheet or that document. Yeah, you could do it manually if there's like 5 rows, but what if you have a spreadsheet that's 20,000 rows and you need to find all these values, or maybe you need to replace, maybe you need to add something in specific places. Those are those are conditions where you're likely going to be looking for something like a for loop. It's going to make more sense here in a second, I hope. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a what you call a list. Um, this is a very simple collection of values. So I'm just going to use fruits here as an example, and then we'll say banana. And these are strings, obviously, but these could be anything. These could be integers, these could be different variables, these could be objects that you created. But again, this is very high level beginner type stuff here. So we're just going to use basic strings, and we have compiled a list of strings. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to print each fruit. So I'm going to say for, this is a for loop, so for fruit in fruits, and you got to have that colon at the end. Now what's the action? We're going to say print the fruit. This could be anything. This is basically like a temporary variable that you're creating. So this could be like for x in fruits, print fruit. This part needs to be what you've defined the variable of the list as, or else it won't know what to look for. So this is basically saying for each item in fruits, print that item. And I'll show you that right now. So if we run that, we get apples, banana, and cherry. So it iterated through each instance or occurrence within this list, and then it did what we told it to do for each one. So this is like an iteration, right? So for fruits in fruits, print fruit. And you could have a whole bunch of other actions like verbs here, right? Like do this, do that, do this, email someone and send them the fruit name or whatever, right? Probably a terrible example, but hopefully you get my point. And just to kind of elaborate on that, we can change this to item. And then we should get the same exact result. Let me clear that first. And then if we run this again, just to show you that that part doesn't really matter. If you put fruit there, it just sounds more intuitive, right? But it could literally be X and run it, and you get the same thing. So again, these are just like temporary variables that you're creating. And what those represent are each of the instances or occurrences within that list, because again, we're looping through the fruits list using a for loop condition. So hopefully that makes sense. We said for x in fruits. So that means for every item that exists in fruits, I want you to print that item. So it said, okay, let me start with apples, print apples, done. Let me go to banana, print banana, done. Let me go to cherry, print cherry, done. And then it completed the loop. Hopefully that makes sense to you guys. Again, a very simple example, but this is extremely powerful. You will, I promise you will use for loops in your code, building even simple applications. Maybe you need to build a script. Again, I find myself doing this very often when I need to um, it could be like push things through an API from a spreadsheet or update values in Active Directory using a spreadsheet. You're going to want to use a for condition because that's going to say, hey, for every one of these values that I've listed, I need you to perform these actions on it. And then you can obviously kind of couple that or pair that with additional evaluations and get more detailed or more complex in your logic because maybe you don't need to perform the same exact action on every one. So you can evaluate for X in fruits, you could say if fruit starts with A or something like that, then print this. Um, and you can just do different things depending on the conditions that are met or evaluated. So hopefully that makes sense. Again, just trying to keep it super simple. A for loop iterates through each occurrence or each instance in a set of data. In this example, we used a list. It could be something different. It could, like I said, it could be a spreadsheet that you uploaded. It could be an array, it could be anything, but just to get the point across, I want to keep it simple and use a list. And just make sure you guys understand that a for loop will loop through each instance in that set of data and then perform whatever action you define, which is what follows this colon here. All right, hopefully that's helpful. All right, guys, the next control structure I want to show you guys is a while loop. This is also very powerful, and you will be using this quite a bit. Um, I guess a good example would be, let's say you build a simple video game and you track the player's health. You could say, while player health greater than 0, go ahead and run the game loop, right? So once the player has 0 life left, or their health or whatever gets to 0, then you can either perform another function, end the loop, whatever you need to do, right? So that's kind of like a, hopefully an easy way for you to visualize what a while loop might be used for. All right, so I am going to create a variable, call it count. I'm just going to say count starts at 1, and then here's our while condition. So while count is less than or equal to 100, we're going to print count's value. We're going to print count, and then we're going to, for each iteration, we're going to increase the count by 1. So in Python, it's a really cool little feature that you can do. You could write this out longhand, count equals count plus 1, but you can instead, if you just want to add to an existing variable, you can say count plus equals 1. Same thing to decrement or subtract from that variable value. You could do count minus equals 1. And it doesn't have to be a number here. In programming, you're building an application, this would probably be a variable. So like, let's say this was a game and you got points for doing some certain action. Normally those points would be defined by a variable of some type. So you would pass that here. Anyway, not to get too deep into a rabbit hole. Um, this is basically what a while loop does. So again, let's talk through it. Okay, so we have a variable of 1 for count, and this says while the count is less than or equal to 100, I want you to print the count, and then I want you to increment this count by 1. So if this works, which it should, we should see the numbers 1 through 99 here. I'm sorry, 1 through 100, because it says less than or equals to, right? So it should print the 100th iteration as well. If we just said less than, then it would only print 99. And then once it gets to 101, it'll break this loop, because it'll say while count is less than or equal to 100. Nope, condition not met, so it's going to kill it right there. So let's go ahead and run this. And there we go. We have 1 through 100. So you can see just how fast that is. I mean, obviously, if you had more complex um, data here or more complex code, it would take a little longer. But you can imagine doing, this could be 10,000, 100,000. This is why programming and scripting is so powerful, right? There's no way that you're going to spend your whole day going through 1,000 lines of something to do something, or even to look for something. This is the only way to do it once you know how to do this type of stuff, guys. So hopefully that made sense. That is a while count. So if we take this out just to kind of prove a point, so while the count is less than 100, let's clear this. We should only get to 99 this time, because on that 100th value, on that 100th iteration, it's going to say, nope, no longer less than 100, break. So let's go ahead and run this. We should get 1 through 99. Here we go. So that is your while loop condition. You can also do things like, if you needed this may be a little too much to talk about right now, but I'll just mention it anyway. I've built games in the past, and maybe you just need like an infinite loop. You could just say while true, right? And there's nothing that would ever set that to false, unless you were to exit the game, basically. But maybe you just need a loop that always runs. That's where you'll see while true with nothing to ever set it to false, if that makes sense. But anyway, for today's purposes, this is the basic use of a while loop. It doesn't have to be numerical here, right? This could be something else. A lot of times you can see things set based on time, based on duration, but when you're getting started, it's mainly going to be for numerical values to get started, like I said, or it could be while conditions are true. So maybe you have like different levels in your game, and then when you level up, you can have it go to maybe the points get bigger as you go to the new levels. So you can say, while level 1, boom, or whatever, right? There's different ways to code that logic. It could be an if statement as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully I didn't blabber too much and confuse you guys, but those were examples of the if statement, and the if kind of ties into the else and the elif, or the elif and the else, if you will. And then we looked at the for loop, and then lastly we looked at the while loop. All right, guys, this was episode 4. Hope you guys are enjoying the series so far. I haven't really planned out what we're going to do for episode 5, but it'll be something that kind of dovetails onto the end of this. And yeah, if you guys haven't checked out the entire playlist and you're just getting started, maybe this is the first video you stumbled upon, give it a look. Like I said, the first video is going to be installing Python. So you literally have zero knowledge of programming or Python. That's great. That's who I'm making this series for, to be honest. We'll get you installed with Python. And then the second video, we get you set up with PyCharm. And that's what you're looking at here. This is PyCharm. And then in that third video, we talked about the different data types. So we talked about floats, integers, strings, that kind of stuff. And then today we're talking about the control structure. So how do you control the flow of that data, right? So this is kind of how we can flow through code. We can use if statements, elif, else, for, and whiles. These are just some of the things you can do, but again, the basic stuff. Um, if you follow along and you kind of piece these together, you could probably write your own script at this point to do something very basic. And if you do that, let me know. I'd be very interested to hear from it, or hear from you guys about it. All right, I'm going to wrap this video up so it's not too long. And yeah, I should have another video, episode 5, out probably within the next week or so. Thanks for sticking around to the end of the video, guys. I really do appreciate it. It would mean a lot if you found any value in this. Please hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to get to 10,000 by the end of this year, so I really appreciate all your support. And leave me a comment down below. Feel free to share this with your friends. Maybe they'll find some value. Maybe they want to get started, just don't know where to start. I think this is a good place because, again, I take you from ground zero and we're just going to build our way up and probably walk through building some type of basic application with you guys. This should also be a two-way communication street here, guys, as far as the instructions go, or the instructionals go. If you guys don't understand something, you need me to recover something, let me know. That's why I'm putting this together, right? Not just doing it for clicks. I am trying to um, reinforce the learning in my head. That's why I like to teach things, but mainly I'm doing this so that you guys can get something out of it. So there are no stupid questions. There's only stupid answers, and that's fine. If I give a stupid answer, I'll do some research and give you a better one. But like I said, there are no stupid questions. So feel free to ask anything. If I don't know the answer, I'll find the answer for you, and we can collaborate together. And yeah, just continue to learn and grow our knowledge so that we become more and more valuable in the IT space. All right, guys. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Hope you all have a great day. Till the next one, take care.